Yeah, yeah. Never not, never under God, never ever, I'm forever on. Check my rep and on, check my repertoire, don't check me not. Let's just checks involved. I've been feeling like I'm next to God, next to God, next to God.
Welcome to the Brothers in Time podcast, right? This is going to be season 3 called Guardians, right? I'm going to be joined with Sanchez, Hudson, and myself, right? So we're going to have some rules for this conversation.
Rule number 1. A person who is saying something obvious should be assumed to be saying something subtle until proven otherwise. Rule number 2. A person who is saying something wrong should be assumed to be saying something counterintuitive until proven otherwise. An example is a whale a fish? At the lowest level, morphologically speaking, if it looks like a fish, it swims like a fish, therefore it's a fish. At the mid-level, it breathes air and has live birth, so it's a mammal. But at the highest level, it reverts back. We are bracketed on Darwin's phylogenetic tree between lampreys, which are clearly fishes, and coelacanths. So we don't always understand if we are sophisticated or unsophisticated relative to somebody's point of view.
When we're talking about these things, you guys said something about men, right? And about the military and thinking in binary, right? What is the worst case scenario, right? When you're born, like think of the worst case. What would that be?
When you're born?
Yeah. What situation can you be born into, or state can you be born into that would be the worst possible thing? So good.
Yeah, no, I don't know if you want. I was just about to ask, like, do you want me to give an example of that, or are you just leading into your next portion here?
I'm probably just leading.
Yeah, go ahead, bro. Carry on.
So what I would say is being born with no parents, right? So you have no mother and no father. And these two people are the ones that are supposed to be teaching you belongingness and love and needs. They're supposed to be the ones giving you your physiological needs and teaching you these needs of yourself. And if you don't have a mother and a father, who is giving that to you? So off rip, you already feel worthless because the people that are supposed to make you feel worthy are not there, right? And that's the first cognition, or one of the first cognitions you have about yourself is I wasn't even worth their time. So, and we know if we go further down the line into statistics and look at institutions, you can have 3 of them. You have the military, prison, and college. I haven't been, so I don't know how to spell it, but these 3 institutions are what are teaching, right? And we're going to talk about men because men commit more crimes than women. We're talking about the worst case scenario. You have a boy born with no parents. The likelihood of him ending up in prison is very, very high, or at least being an overly aggressive male to where he will sexually assault somebody or so on and so forth, right? What are the institutions that we have as an objective reality that we're using to control or manipulate these issues? And it's these 3 institutions. And the military teaches you binary. It teaches you structure, right? But it's almost a mental structure because it's not restricting your movement as much, but it's restricting your ability to have options. Essentially, you don't have all of these options, but your movement isn't restricted. In prison, you have no options and you have no movement, so it's restricting you physically. It's like putting a parameter around you physically. And then in college, it's giving you all of these options and all of these movements. But which one is the most effective at producing the result that we want? And that's, I would say that's coping skills, I guess, right? Productive members of society. Which one is working the best? And I know that's a opinion, but I would say colleges and the military. You have the most likely chance of becoming society. But the issue is this one. And why is this one an issue? And I would say is that these people have none of these coping skills, right? And the logic that they're using to interact with their reality is fucked. Now, a lot of people believe that they're born like that, And I disagree with that, right? I don't think a baby is born evil, right?
No.
I don't think that. I don't believe that, right? But this goes back to what is our purpose and what is our goal, right? And this goes to that parenting thing that I was talking about earlier. So this is the authority, right? And then people are the subject. So this is becoming the authority that is dictating the subject's movements, right? And then person to person, that would be like parent to child. So all of these relationships, you can basically make an analogy of like what parent would do to a child, right? What does the United States want to do for all the states? Because they're basically responsible and accountable for whether they fucking live or die, basically. So
out of curiosity, though, so to believe in the implication of occupation, right? So to say that we are the ones observing our thoughts, or to that extent, whatever that might be, and saying that as a child is born with a certain personality, right? The chances of that personality being bad or societally dictated bad, such as non-empathetic.
Okay.
Where does that toe the line with like inherently evil as a societal dictation? I don't believe in evil as a concept personally.
Yeah.
Is every evil that we've deemed has been deemed good on its own accord. So if you're born as a man or a woman who is non-empathetic, you cannot level with someone's emotions at all. Where do you toe that line between inherent evil or universal evil and not?
So now we've reached a point where I don't believe the information is comprehensive, right?
Okay.
Because what we end up doing with those people is we kill them, right? A murderer, they die. That's the punishment that they get. Now, child molesters, spend their lives in prison, this, that, and the other. Anybody that you would consider to be empathetic that would express behaviors that we would be able to consider as evil, we lock them in prison and we don't do anything with them, right? What I would like to see, right, and this is the only prescription I'm going to make on this specific podcast, is that murderers and child rapists and any of these super negative crimes that we see, right, where you're taking away the liberty of another human being or the innocence of another human being or the livelihood of another human being, you stay in prison and we study you.
Yes.
We study you and figure out why the fuck you did what you did, because this problem is twofold. Is it a hardware or a software issue? Because if you're embedded with biological information, as far as like, we'll say your prefrontal cortex has one wrinkle too many, and that may lead you to be a murderer 20 years down the road. We don't have that kind of information right now. So we cannot make a definitive claim about why these things happen. And in the same sense, we don't have a clear picture of what it is to be the perfect parent, right? We don't know what that would be. So we have no least common denominator to base our scientific studies off of, right? So until we can figure out what the source code is of what being a human is, we can't even begin to make these distinctions.
I agree.
You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So I personally don't believe it's a hardware issue. I don't believe in extreme cases, and those extreme cases are like if you're born on the spectrum, like autism, stuff like that. Those can lead to developmental issues in which you are, again, this goes back to the ability to express yourself, which would then become a rapist or whatever, because they can't express their sexual needs or whatever. And I could see that. That makes sense to me logically. But what's more likely to me is that during your upbringing, right, if you're coming in with this knowledge, right, and we're going to do a causal chain, right, this is your birth, and you have this info within you, but I don't know what that information is. I have no idea what this is. And I'm your parent here. And I give you some signal, right? You react to it, right? Your reaction tells me something about your relative position and what you're believing or what you're thinking. So then I have to change the way in which I'm interacting with you to be something different, and then seeing how that affects you. because I'm basically learning who the fuck you are.
Mm-hmm.
You are a human being. My children are human beings. They are not something for me like Play-Doh to like mold into fucking whatever. And that's been the predominant belief of children in America, which is a predominant belief because of certain Zoroastrian Western philosophies or theologies, right? Where children are essentially born blank. We have to program them, then they become good people, right?
Absolutely. And that's where so much of our schooling has come from. That's so much of our the parenting books that you do see come from. I mean, this is a lot of the fundamental baseline of Western society is that I will shape my child into what I see them fit to be.
Yep.
This is how you have kids hunting that don't want to hunt. This is how you have kids playing sports that don't want to play sports, or whatever the case is.
Or
It's a tough
kids
one
who
to
are
crack.
born homosexual that
Right.
repress that emotion all the way out until they're 40, and then they barely know who the fuck they are, and they're having all of these repressions manifesting into their reality and making negative outcomes for themselves.
Is how do you ever trust yourself again? This is one question that I've asked so often, is that how do you, as a homosexual man that's been taught to repress those thoughts, how do you ever trust yourself again the moment you act on that thought? You've
Yep.
just betrayed what you were told was the right answer for
Yep.
20, 30, 50 years. And now you've made the choice that you felt was inherently true to you. That's tough.
So I think this is going to be a little bit more abstract, and there's no real true evidence or scientific evidence to support this, but these are my observations. I feel like people are born into certain boxes.
Sure.
And the first one is parents. And now this next one kind of goes in and out of the other two. These two switch places sometimes, but this one is religion. And this one is government. So the first thing that you do in like therapy or whatever is like reassessing what you believe or hold to be true, right? And a lot of that information off rip comes from your parents, right? So that generational gap difference that I was talking about before, about like this generation believed this, and they're trying to teach their kids that this is right, but some of this stuff is actually wrong, right? Some of this stuff doesn't translate into our generation. So we have to pick and choose what parts to take. But what ends up happening for a lot of people is they get repressed to where, well, my dad said, and this is where you get daddy issues and mommy issues, where like dad didn't love you enough or didn't hug you enough or didn't do this enough. So you're always trying to impress him or get him to show you some type of emotion, right? Give him, I want my dad to hug me or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, show me that you give a fuck about me. And it's that back to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is like connection, right? And the same can be said about the mom, same can be said about the dad. But the trick here is that your reaction to this is relative to you, right? And that was that paradox that I was talking about before, about the kid who could grow up to be an alcoholic versus not, based on what he saw his dad do. So you have to be honest with yourself about who your father is, right? The gun, the ground, and the target, right? Who this person is, or at least the appearance of, because you can only ever know what the appearance of it is, not what it actually is. And then what you believe about this, right? This is you. And then you figure out what the fuck this is, and then you can move on about your day, right? Because a lot of the things that you believe about this control certain aspects of your behavior, right? And then when you get into government and religion, it's even more subconscious. These are like macros that are like so deeply ingrained in the way that we view the world. You're talking like different types of coding programs, like Amazon or Python versus C++, right? One of them's better for fucking GIFs, and the other one's better for objects moving and shit. And it's like choosing and picking and choosing which macro you're trying to follow.
Mm-hmm. It's tough, dude. It's the recognition of the outcome that you're trying to attain, which is what I think you're getting at as clearly as we can try to articulate, is that if you have a preferred perception or outcome that you're trying to achieve, you have to think about the delivery method of such.
Yeah. Right, because what I was trying to get at, but I didn't really prove this point, was like about justice and punishment. So like, what is prison supposed to be, right? Why are we punishing them, right? Is it because we want them to feel pain, or is it because we want them to change their behavior? I feel like half the people would answer that they want them to change their behavior, but in actuality, they want them to feel pain, right? That's what they feel justice is. You deserve it because you did something wrong. When you're talking about children, though, that belief creates negativity and like negative further down the road, right? And the way that they interact with their reality is that only thing I've ever known is being punished. You know what I'm saying? So then when you're talking about the prison system or children, my bad, what in actuality what you want is for the child to change its belief of why it's doing what it's doing. Mm-hmm. You want him to no longer, or her, to believe that picking up this knife and throwing it across the room is a good idea. Well, how do you do that? Like, how do you show them that? And that's relative to the individual, and that's relative to the situation, and that's where things go from one to many. You know what I'm saying? It's all relative to the situation, but it's the same concept of like, I want them to change their behavior. So when you bring it up to the organizational level and you're talking about prisoners, and we have a recidivism rate of 70%, our efficacy is not there. We are not creating a situation in which we are making better people. We're actually making worse people. Right. So if we're trying to stop this, just punishing them isn't fucking working. Correct. So not only should that show us that the way that we're doing it in parenting doesn't work, but it shouldn't work in prisons either. So we should be teaching them social skills and coping mechanisms and this, that, and the other. And then people will say things like, well, why do they get more than blah, 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 blah. Well, they need more fucking help.
Correct. They need more, bitch. Yeah, dude. I mean, like, so recently I've crossed so many like emotionally intelligent bridges in my life that I didn't think I was ready for. But the realization of like my self-worth, the realization of my position in my life, the realization of why I fucking deal with the shit I do and my knee-jerk reactions, like the habitual way that I have taught myself how to react to most things, dude, is fucking ridiculous. So it's been a little emotional journey recently.
Did some of what I talk about or was talking about hit some strings for you?
Absolutely. So in particular, I mean, it was the goal concept of how you're discussing, you know, when a person wants their emotions validated in the moment. Like, my job doesn't even allow for that, bro. So I have to literally switch brains on shift and off shift. I have to fucking disconnect something or replug in something else. Because like when I go into a home and someone says, I hit them, or I did this, I broke this shit because I feel this way. I'm like, well, tough shit, bro, because the government said you're not allowed to do that. You're coming to jail. Like, it's so strange to have to convey to people, man. But I'll tell you what, dude, like, my main thing that's been helping me this whole year is playing music, dude. I've been able to like take those thoughts and put them into fucking acoustic resonations and just dissipate them out there, dude.
But so let me ask you this: are you learning as you're doing it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think the geometry of that expansion of your mind is what actually is helping you. It may not be your relative to the your relative feeling about music helps, right? And that's why you're able to expand. But I think the thing that's helping you the most is the expansion itself, right? And you've come to a point where, like, for me, learning in Blender is doing the same thing, right? I'm learning all these new fucking shits that I didn't know I could even do. And I'm like, This is dope. This is dope as fuck. Right. I have some other thing because I got to a point where I thought I knew everything and it got really depressing. Like, what else is there?
So that was a concept that I was fighting with at the beginning of this year, is that I didn't even feel like I was playing an active role in my life anymore. I was reacting to shit as they presented themselves to me, and I made the comparisons of like, okay, I'm gonna go to work. Okay, a call comes onto the board, I go to it and I handle it. Next, a traffic or a car makes an offense, I go and stop it. I have that conversation. Whatever happens from there happens. Next, the drill weekend shows up, I fucking go to drill. Fucking all assignments due in school, I do the assignment, I turn it in. I'm not playing an active role at all. I'm making no decisions. Everything's just happening to me.
Have you listened to Alan Watts at all?
Dude, he's my man. So I
you've
read,
listened to where he talks about being the protagonist in your life?
yes. So the one thing that ruined my childhood, dude, was The Power of Myth. I read that book, dude, and it ruined the way I was analyzing shit. The Power of Myth, I think, is Alan Watts. Hold on, let me make sure I'm not saying nothing here. Oh, no, that's Joseph Campbell. A little off. So I actually listened to Alan Watts. He's on Spotify under a tag of psychedelic.
Yeah.
So the conversations of being the protagonist of your own story, or the processes in which your mind goes to validate yourself before others. Fucking incredible.
I love Alan, dude. I fucking love.
Definitely Joseph Campbell. That book is I read that book when I was 16 and I got baptized that same year and immediately revoked. Like, dude, I went through this whole spiritual journey, but what I realized this year is the levels of intelligence that you can experience and suppress. So the two areas of my life that I have overly suppressed is emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence.
Yes, and that's my issue with fucking Jordan Peterson.
Yes.
Have you heard him literally say, "What the fuck is emotional intelligence?"
Correct.
And I'm like,
It's
you piece of shit.
Yeah, that's
piece
retarded.
Of shit.
Yes, because the argument is completely valid, but that exists. There are people that are like almost full empath, fully can be able to sink into you, and they learn how to do that, be it through experience or classrooms or whatever.
Yep.
It's, dude, I'm like fucking almost emotionally retarded, and it's been by design. But it's been completely by design. I chose to be that way because I was like, men are stoic. Nothing phases you. Nothing bothers you.
But that's what I mean by like it's relative. So
yes,
those larger concepts, right? Religion and this, that, and the other. There's another one in there that Carl Jung talks about, and it's the imago, right? The imago of your mother, or like divine. We can call them divine masculine and divine feminine, right? The image of women and men. Right. You create an image of what you think a man is in your mind, and then that's what you go for. Right. And that's all relative based on what you've experienced in your life, whether it be good or bad. So what we should be trying to do as a society is give the baseline of the emulation, like the perfect emulation of men, whatever we can do, whatever that would be. And then that would create, in theory, better men.
Right.
Because the more information is accurate, the more likely somebody is to choose that information over something that is inaccurate.
Correct. So when you were growing up, I know that my definition of a man was someone that was big and strong and could fix trucks and fight and fucking hunt and fish and could do all these things. And I mean, I was raised in small town nowhere where all that shit is super applicable. I don't know what your definition of that was when you were first coming out.
So I'm different. I'm very different, where I didn't have parents. I had guardians, right? So like I didn't know what these things were supposed to be. So I've spent my entire life learning, where like I literally had to join the army to know what it was to be a man. Like I thought that was because my grandfather was the closest thing I had, and he was in the Air Force. So then from there, I was like, all right, well, I'll do this. And then once I got in the army, I learned a bunch of things. I became that image, right? Beating people up all the time, drinking, this, that, and the other. And then that didn't do anything for my mental health. It made me worse.
Right.
So I was like, well, there's more I have to learn. And then once I realized there was more, like, fuck. So I've adopted the philosophy of like, I'm never going to know everything, but I'm going to know as much as physically fucking possible. Because I don't ever want to be wrong, right? I don't ever want to be wrong for like a belief that I'm having for an extended period of time, because eventually I'm going to have to change it, and I'd rather not look stupid for a year.
So I know that I just had this conversation today one of the guys that I was working with was talking about that his wife doesn't understand what it's like to be a cop. And all I could say back to him was, you don't know what it's like to be a housewife. These are things that you know that you do not know, or should know that you do not know. I'm like, what don't you know that you don't know? And which is obviously a concept we've talked about in the past. It's the idea that, like, I am fully aware that I don't know the stresses of working in an office. I'm fully aware of that. What don't I know? I want to know. I want to expand that. I want to be able to shrink that exterior bubble of the don't know.
Then there's that whole, that don't know that you don't know. How do you even fucking figure out where the fuck it is?
You don't, unless it's just kind of like revealed to you in some way, shape, or form. Or it's I use the terminology of inoculate a lot. The whole idea of preventing disease. But if you inoculate yourself to the idea of ignorance, that you is in and of yourself are ignorant to things around you, you will pursue ways to become not, or should be, in my opinion. I love learning about things, man. One of the things that I do consistently with people that like fucking shoot up heroin. I just was out with two of them this morning, and I sat on the side of the road with them and talked for as long as I could until I got another call, because I don't know you. I don't understand what it's like to be you. I have my judgments. I have my preconceived notions. I already think I know that you're a junkie and you're a piece of shit and you prioritize drugs over everything else in your life. And I might be right about some of these concepts. However, what does your day-to-day thought process look like? When you wake up in the morning, what are you saying? What are you thinking? Because I know what I do. I know I'm fully aware of what someone in an office building does. I know that I don't know what they do. Rather, I should say. But I do not know anything about the basic core thought process of someone that doesn't have a job and shoots up heroin. Where do you fucking, is your first thought go and get a side job so you can get enough money to get heroin? Or is it, you know what I mean? Like, what is it? I want to know.
It's divine command theory again. It's that you need this outside thing to make you better. Because I'll tell you, as a meth addict, like, I thought I was a better person when I was on meth. Like, I thought I was better. I was happier. This is what I'm supposed to be. And that's why I don't like AA specifically, because AA makes you say that I am powerless over alcohol. I have to admit that I'm powerless over alcohol. Well, fuck you. I am not powerless over alcohol. I can literally choose to not do it. That is my power. Like, you're taking away my power of choice by admitting that. So fuck you. Warriors or veterans, right, have a piece of knowledge that no other human is capable of having unless you are this thing, right? And you use that piece of knowledge that you've gained from war to help bring back to the Republic and rebuild it better and stronger. Did you mute yourself?
No, not at all. I was just kind of listening to what you were saying. No, that's exactly the concept that it's trying to convey, is that there's a building block based in people who have more exposure to the extremes of existence, peace and war, chaos and order. I think that they're probably the most centralized people that can be conveying message to the masses.
But it's our responsibility as the guardians to figure out what it is that we fucking know. Right? That cave, right? Get out of that cave, look at the light, and then turn back around. And when you start seeing these shadows, you're like, huh, I know where the fuck you are. I know what you're saying. I know what this is. I know exactly what this is.
So there's a couple quotes that I loved from the fucking Republic, man, about justice. And the two of those is, justice is giving good to friends and evil to enemies. And it's during their argument of what justice is.
Yeah. And
then justice is the art of theft for the good of friends and the harm of enemies. And I thought those were very peculiar, because it's obviously, this isn't where they landed in the argument. This is just something they were stating in it. But I love the opening question from Plato to Socrates of, how does love suit you with age? Are you the same man you were? And Socrates replies, peace. And I thought that was profound as shit, dude, where it's like, okay, how do you reach that point in your life where you can say that, like, where I am today with the love that I have or the love that I've given, I am at peace with that? Yeah. That is a beautiful fucking pursuit, dude.
It's accepting who you are and where you are, but you have to learn both of those things.
Yes. Which is exactly, I feel like so many of the people do my frequent flyers, the people that I take to jail on a weekly basis, they have no way of figuring out who they are to baseline and how they can contribute to the ones around them.
Yeah. And you said something earlier, and I didn't really get to it, but I wrote it on the whiteboard if you ever watch this again. And it was about you don't feel relevant, right? And I wrote the word utility. Yes. Because I think every human, right, wants to feel like they have a purpose. Well, what is a purpose? It is it's almost like a tool. You have it's not a purpose, but you have a utility. Like people can use you. You have a sense of worth about you. You are worth something, right? So that's what people truly actually want, is they want to be utilized to the best of their abilities. And when they're talking in the Republic about one man for every position, I don't necessarily take that as like, if you're born a painter, you have to stay a painter. It's more about you figure out what the fuck your utility is and you give it to people, and you figure out what that is, because it'll make you feel the best.
Correct. Yeah. That's why so many people are gravitating towards being a teacher at a young age, or gravitate towards being an officer or in the military. I know that for me personally, my utility has kind of shifted within this year, that I don't really know what mold I am supposed to fit. I know what mold I do fit well, but do I enjoy it to the degree that I could be better in? I don't know.
Yeah, true. Because my goal for this whole thing is to, like, I'll be as open and honest about the issues that I've had in my life, right? If you guys hit me with like, what, tell me the worst part of this, or what was this like, or you know what I'm saying? Or like, tell me the worst thing in your life, I'll tell you. And I want to be able to talk about the way I got out of it, or the way that I'm dealing with it, or whatever, because I feel like a lot of people have the issue of asking for help. And when they see these things in other people, right, that mirror, they may not understand the mirror concept, but the mirror concept doesn't need them to understand it for it to work.
Right. Correct. Well, so much of that has come to fruition recently, man. I realized so many things about, like, not trusting people when they say, like, hey, where are you right now? And they say, I'm at home. And you're like, bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, you're not at home, whatever that thought process is. It's because you inherently do not trust yourself. Whatever that concept is, dude. You do not trust yourself to make the right decision. So if you were presented with an opportunity, would you abuse it?
Bro, I'm about to. This is something, and I mentioned it. Am I still sharing my screen?
Yep.
And we're going to get to this eventually. But so this middle part, right, is the self, the you. This is who you are. And then you're in this bubble of your personal unconscious. So the animus and the anima, women have animus, men have anima, collective unconscious, personal unconscious. So essentially, everything that you've done or you feel that you're capable of doing, right, is in that personal unconscious. In the outer world, so when you think of the word ego, forget everything that you know about that word and literally consider it as energy going outward from you to something else. So you're projecting your personal unconscious onto the outer world. So when you're saying like, hey, I don't trust this person because this is what I feel about me, this is where it's coming from. And it's a combination of the things that you've done in the past, things that you've never forgiven yourself for, things that you know that you're capable of doing. So you automatically assume that that other person is capable of doing it too. And that's that's that mirror, that whole shit. But this is that.
Absolutely, dude.
I love Carl Jung.
Diagram of like, as you project outward to the outer world, that's exactly what you're representing to it and allowing back in. That's your filtering system back and forth.
Yep. And the persona is not only what it's like what the outer world sees you as, and what
Yes.
and there's like a discrepancy a lot of the times between
Yeah.
like, what you think people are seeing and what you're actually showing them.
Right. God damn, I love that shit, dude. Well, and what's frustrating to me in one element and like humbling in another, dude, is that it's like so many of these concepts that I feel like I'm crossing alone in my bedroom. They've already been crossed 1,000 times over. This is where the expansion of mind comes so heavily into play that you can go off and hunt. Yeah, man, I think it's very impressive to see where your hunt for knowledge can take you and how you can find the answers that you were looking for.
Okay, yeah. So this is where we start getting into the more esoteric stuff.
Yeah.
Is my camera still? Can you see me?
Yeah.
Like, actually. Yeah. So this is again on my YouTube the characters that I'm going to do. So you have birth, death, right? So all humans have. I'm going to calling this the Delta 9. All humans are going to be born, they're going to die. And the mean analogy is life, right? So you have the third thing here, which is life. But all humans have a past, present, future, and then all humans have mother, father, self, right? So out of those three, you have life, you, and the present. Not really pertinent to this, but if you were so that whole concept of what is nothing presupposes the existence of something, and then building through the physics of all of that, you get to one thing, right? This object, right? Well, what is this object representative of? And in mythology, there's this concept of aeon, ion, and this is boundless time, so no boundaries. And this is contrasted with Chronos, who is empirical time, which would be past, present, future. No, my bad. Past, present, future. So not only is this mathematical geometry, you just got the diameter, you have the radius of a circle, just from this fucking basic concept. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And this becomes X for time. So from Chronos, then you also get the Ouroboros, which is the world snake or whatever, which is it's the constant rebirth of life. So it's the snake with the head that's eating its tail, right? That's this boundary that we're living in, right? So everything about reality is based off of time. Now the question is, does something exist outside of time? Something outside here. And we would call this God, but I also like to call it the realm of Cthulhu, because it's the unknown. Like, actually imagine what that would be, what that would mean to be outside of time. You would be able to see the past, present, and future as if it was one thing. I don't think our brains can comprehend what that would mean.
No. Well, maybe. So I'm now sold on the concept that our minds are the only fourth dimensional object that we can actually truly embrace. The idea that we can travel forward and backwards in our head. We can see the moment to moment as it's happening, but we can also see our memories or where we hope to be in the future, or what ifs and possibilities of the future.
Yep, I agree.
But our bodies, super linear. Everything in our life is linear. However, everything outside of our life is extremely just is. The universe is. We don't know how far back it goes. We don't know how far in the future it goes. We have speculation, but no actual... I mean, for God's sakes, man, our only proof of the Big Bang is that the universe is growing. That's the only thing. So for us, they're like, there must have been an origin. Like, everything had to be touching at one point. That's our whole conceptuality of it.
It's a backwards causal chain, right? And then that's the macro. Dude, I can't wait to fucking argue with like a Catholic about these concepts, because the only reason you believe that is because of this backwards causal chain, and then you're adding something. Right. This is what I mean. Right. This is time, birth, death. Do we know what happens before this?
Nope.
This whole space? No, we don't. Do we know what happens after this? So what they're giving a value here that there's no proof of, to change something in here.
Correct.
Or from here to change something in here. And this is the DCT executable error that's going to pop up in the in that video, and I'm going to be like, I just need to update your drivers, and then that's going to pop up and say your NAT type is restricted and blah 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 blah. And we know what those things mean, and when you actually think about what I'm trying to present to them, it makes sense. But
Yeah.
The divine command theory is like something from out here is controlling in here, but that's not true. And you already made that point with the microorganism shit. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Okay. So then in the video, or like the three-dimensional structures I'm going to build, it's going to be like a Stargate, and then I'm going to project a body through it, right? Like a hologram, and be like, this is the only thing that you've been given, right? You've been given a body, your avatar. Well, what the fuck is your body? And then I'm going to make a work breakdown. First off, I'm going to make a bill of materials, right, with the 11 systems of the body, and kind of briefly describe what they all do, right? Because this is what we've all been given, because we are more the same than we are different. So I'm going to define how we're all exactly the same, right? You eat food, it processes through your body, it gives you energy, shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm going to strictly speak on the limbic system and the nervous system, because when you talk about a computer and you talk about a hard drive, or just the fact that this whole thing that we're doing, where does that exist? You see what I'm saying? It exists in the hard drive, but it exists on the electricity, not anywhere specifically. So when you're talking about your consciousness and your thoughts, it's the same premise. Like, it's existing on top of these electric signals. So we aren't our body. We are the electricity or the energy that's controlling the body. We aren't this thing itself. And there's some very interesting, I don't know if you've seen The Blood of Zeus on Netflix, but you should. It's about Hesiod, and in the Greeks mythology, that whole mythology you can break down, or that lore you can break down into one statement, where it's basically when they killed the giants, or the I can't remember what they called, the Titans. Yeah, when they killed the Titans, basically Mercury was able to like take your souls and shit, and then all men are souls imprisoned inside of giants, right? We are in a prison in this meat sack. Like, this is essentially what they were trying to say is, this is hell. This is the lower realm. This is the physical realm.
Right.
When we actually exist on a higher realm, and that's what's within you. But when you don't take anything out from out here, we can learn so much about life within here, and we can manipulate this to make it whatever the fuck we want it to be.
Correct. Yes. It's not limited to these fucking... Well, this is my core element of argument against religion inherently, is that you are taking what we understand as the most complex fucking thing to ever exist, which is life, and making it linear. You are taking it and making it a book. You are saying, and then God said, let there be light. And then at some point he's going to say, fuck the light, I'm killing everything. This is your linear progression of your religion, and most religions in that case. What I love, dude, is I went through a class of creationism and got to learn a lot of like the creation stories relative to where they were formed, like the Egyptian creation story.
You were telling me.
Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah. So the concept that most creation stories are based solely on the terrain that they inhabited. That's it. The chaoticness, the amount of chaos that can pursue a civilization is how just or how kind or how evil their gods are.
Can you see what I'm drawing?
Yeah.
So the strategic level of that belief, right, is the creation story itself. But in your mind, it's actually a very small thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
But when you take that and you go back to the direct, and you take it out of phase just a little bit, that's your childhood.
Correct.
And the state of your childhood creates the image of your gods, basically, which would be your parents, and the way that you're interacting with reality. It's the dude.
Hell yeah, dude.
So medication, right? This is a topic for another day too, but psychological medication, what it's doing is it's putting physical barriers on you. And we both know what like fire control measures are, right? Like giving you certain parameters to work inside of. What that medication is trying to do is do that same thing with your brain, right? Making this box safe to operate in, right? But what people end up feeling, especially in this prison environment or like mental health environment, they're like, I still have these thoughts. The medication isn't working. It's like, no, that you have to train your brain. It's giving you a safe space to work on these things. The medication is not supposed to be forever. It's supposed to fix you. It's supposed to fix you in place so that you can clean your fucking room.
Correct. Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes, dude. So I believe one of my recent conversations with a guy that's by far the most emotionally intelligent person I've ever met. He was talking about the concept that almost all men, so if you generalize, all men base their relationships in shame. And what that boils down to is like, I have to be a man for my woman or a man for my child, whatever that is. I have to be a man in this situation. If I'm not, I am shamed. I need to be able to perform. I need to be able to task. I need to be able to do these things, right? Women, however, base theirs in abandonment, that if I do this, who do I lose? And how do I keep this individual present with me if I so choose them to be? That is a hard thing to overcome in the self-analysis situation. Look at how many men, for instance, that you know right now at your age that still talk about the glory days of high school football. What the fuck is that, man?
I don't know anybody that does that.
Okay, well,
all my
I know
friends
a shit
from high
ton.
school are dead or in prison. So
well, that's fair. Yeah, all my closest friends, yeah, are done. However, I work in the same town that I grew up in, so I run into people all the time that I went to school with, and they want to talk about football and shit. Even if I wasn't on the team with them, dude, they're like, man, we were like fucking 3 years in a row state champions, bro. Like I'm fucking no joke. You get me? It's like, dude, you're fucking 30. Shut up. But people who have nothing to be proud of will be proud of everything. And so this is a baseline in shame, especially for men, dude, is that you can't have another man be more than you. God forbid.
yeah, but then that goes back to a value statement. What is more? What are you even assessing?
Well, I feel like for the most of society in Western culture, especially in America, is its wealth. You can dictate all of your self-worth or your worth to others in a financial aspect. So many people do that shit, man. You got the truck, the house, the motorcycle, you got all that shit? Man, I don't have anything. You're better than me.
So you're saying physical.
I think most people baseline themselves in the physicality, yes. Tangible objects.
See, I agree. I don't disagree with that, but I would disagree with. So there's something in the medical field called referent pain, is what I think it's, or referred pain. So you go to the doctor because your neck hurts, right? But when the doctor's looking at you, there's nothing wrong with your neck. But on further examination, they're like, oh, your ankle is broken.
Right.
And that is actually the issue, but you're feeling it somewhere else. So I would say it's the same concept of the allegory of the cave. It's the shadow, right? They're looking at this physical thing as a representation of, but it's actually a representation of some other thing that they're having an issue with, where it's like they don't feel capable, like they can do more, or they're weighing their worth in some physical object because that's the only thing they've ever been taught. And the anger and the emotions, they don't even know how to deal with, so they're not even aware of them half the time. Like those emotions are just taking over them. Then it's about teaching them this emotional intelligence shit that would get them out of that system or that modality of like that constant circle. But we have this culture that is a very materialistic culture, right? That's what capitalism is. And it's like, it's hard to show people, right? There's certain people that are doing it, like Gary Vee's, like teaching people about happiness and how just do what the fuck you want to do. Be happy about it and get where you're going to get to. But when you have a culture who's being taught that the only way out of the hood is to become a basketball player or a rapper, right? It's creating a cycle that they can't get out of. And I feel like there's an issue there.
Yes.
What that issue is, I know
that from your time as an EMT and obviously my time in law enforcement, like, dude, the majority of society is not even ready to grow out of it. The vast majority of the people you dealt with or who I dealt with on a daily basis are not ready to be consciously aware of themselves. They are so preoccupied with the mere concept that they'll fucking yell and scream and bitch and moan about somebody's body or the actions they took just because it's an insecurity in themselves that they're refusing to acknowledge.
I 100% agree with you, and I've been talking. Me and my wife have this talk.
Yeah.
So she has faith in humanity. She believes that humans are predominantly good, and I've had this argument, and I'm like, some people are fucking stupid, and she was like, yeah, well, and I was like, I would say most people are stupid. She was like, you can't say that because you don't know most people. I was like, fine, you're right, but
okay, but pattern recognition is what made human beings successful hunters. I promise you, my pattern recognition of the trailer parks is that they're fucking stupid. Like,
yeah. But I was saying like about waking people up, right? So the goal is to wake as many people up as possible, right, to these concepts. And when I say wake, I don't mean woke. I mean just being aware of the pattern. So the issue is you have parents that are breeding this unawareness into their children at a rate, right? But which rate is higher? What can we teach people to be aware faster than the rate of people being taught to be unaware? Do you see what I'm saying? And the only way that I can see that would work is if we created a model education system that had these concepts in the most diluted and general forms, like general relativity, so it crosses all boundaries, right? Where like you can only control yourself and your actions. You know what I'm saying? Like your feelings matter to you. Like your subjective experience is real. Like objective reality isn't the only thing. You can change things if you want to change them, like things like that. But how do you teach people that? How do you show them that it works? Well, you have to, it has to work. So you have to give them the modality as well. And I think that if the education system, for instance, right, we implemented therapy, because the worst possible situation is you grow up with no parents or you grow up with two parents who treat you like dog shit. How do we reach a kid whose hell is home? Right. And that's what the public school system is supposed to be for, is to get into those houses, because you can't dictate to parents how to be parents, but you can dictate how we teach children. And certain lessons that the parents aren't teaching, whether or not they're alcoholics or heroin addicts or whatever, we could be teaching at school. We could be showing them these things at school. So whatever, like that paradox from the children, the twins that have an alcoholic father, the one that becomes an alcoholic, he could be getting the information that he needs from school instead of from his house.
And that's the hopeful concept. Is that?
I don't think it's hopeful. I think it's a goal, right? I am fully aware that perfection is an idea. It's not an actuality. But I also think it is an actuality, because perfect to me would be that it was the best thing based on the parameters that it was given. That would be perfect in my mind as well, right? If, we're in a firefight and there's fucking 300 dudes, right? And I see perfect as all of us living and we survive, and then we live and we survive. Like that went perfect.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But some people would be like, that was shit. There was fucking da da da. Like, no, what ended up happening though was it went perfectly.
Right. So it becomes an argument of like the definition itself, because I would call that an excellent outcome. Because a perfect outcome would be that we probably weren't fucking in that fight, or you could have avoided something.
Yeah, but now you're taking something away that you can't take away.
Correct.
It is what it is.
It's the argument of like, well, we shouldn't be in Afghanistan. However, we are. So what's the perfect outcome? But I've been asking people that have had like the complaints of Afghanistan to me saying it was all for nothing. I'm like, define nothing. So what I've asked everybody to do, define me the nothingness.
Yep.
Because I can supply you with proof that, it was definitely for something. Whatever that something is, you can dictate, but nothing is define that. If it was nothing to do with the goal, is it nothing to do with the achievable action? Is it nothing to do with yourself? Do you feel like you didn't do enough? What is this?
Yep.
But, at a higher level with the Afghanistan conflict, what I think is shitty is that China, Russia, Eastern or Western European countries, and the U.S. has trade deals already signed with the Taliban.
Yep.
So that's pretty poopy that like already they're just recognized as like a global power. Like it's all good. Like,
well, the hope is right, and this is relative to time again because everything is based on time. So, how long did it take you to learn things about yourself? You said 25 years. 25
years to cross the first plane, dude. I'm so still fucked. And it was like the easiest plane I feel like you could cross. But it didn't actually it sounds so trivial in concept, but I do believe that most people my age right now still are in the thought that I'm wrong.
Yeah, they are.
Is that not everybody thinks like you, bro. And they're like, bullshit. Like, it's all good. Like, everybody sees it this way or should see it this way. No. There's 1,000 fucking outcomes that led 1,000 people to the way they're thinking right now, bro.
Yep.
Exposure and time.
Yep. So take that from that direct interaction of yourself and apply it to Afghanistan. You know what I mean? The goal or the hope is that time after everything that we've done will build up in that country because Kabul had, gender studies as a degree to kind of teach these people like, yo, women are not less than you motherfuckers, right? Shit like that. So that'll take time to like really get into their core programming. And that's the difference between influence and coercion, right? And I feel like we all want to help them, but what is the most efficient way to do it that would produce the most efficacy? And I think that nobody is willing to wait the amount of time that it would actually take to help them, right? Because it would take a generation to do that.
But the problem is we have two types of generations arguing with each other right now: the microwave generation and the we want a war generation. So you have a generation full of shame that America didn't inherently win this war, and then you have the exact opposite side of the fence saying, well, we need to win it now. We should have won it now because everything in their life has been instantaneous.
Yeah.
So we can't see the byproducts of anything yet. But this has been the trend of global conflict for fucking 70 plus years since World War I, man. That after World War I ended, everyone was like, that's it, man. We're never doing that shit again. 20 years later, we're doing it again.
Like every single country is like a kid in a sandbox and they're fighting over some sandbox that they're never going to go to. Right. And then when you talk about Star Wars and like how the Empire was ruling all of these different planets and shit and how they had to interact and everybody looked like stormtroopers and they're all fucking dumb and this, that, and the other. But when you're talking about like trying to get everybody on the same fucking page, it's very similar to going to a different fucking planet. Yeah. Right? Trying to get these people onto the same page. And then anything that you're presenting them with that you would say is good, they may still see it as evil. Correct. Right. So you're trying to subvert that belief as best you can to make it as ethical as possible. But then you go into like, what is the we've talked about this before, like the mass of the planet, right? Do you think it's infinite? Well, no. We know that there's dimensions. Well, how much resources are in there? Well, we don't fucking know. And are we using these resources faster than they're replenishing themselves? Well, possibly. We don't actually know that either. And I don't know if there is a way to know that for sure unless we knew what all of the resources were. And I don't think there's any way to know that either. Right. But it's a logical assumption that if it's there, it could be gone. But unless we know for a fact it's renewable because we made it that way, We
Right.
know that electricity is renewable. We know that. So it would behoove us to transition to that so that we don't in the future run into this problem. And like you were saying, a tomorrow problem, right? Don't be tomorrow men. And that's what our entire country is based on. The world is based off of that right now. It's like, we'll deal with that in the future. Like, that's not our problem now.
Right. We'll cross that bridge when it's inevitable,
Yeah, fuck that.
not when
I'm
it's
trying to
possible.
like what I was saying before, like I want to know I'm wrong as soon as possible so I don't take a year to realize how dumb I am. I don't want to have to backtrack and fix shit for the shit that I fucked up because of this one belief. I want to fix this thing now so that I can fucking move on with my life and learn new things. You know what I mean? Like, I want to continue moving forward and up.
Absolutely. It's progression in its core nature. It's the idea that I want to see better. I don't want to see the same shit.
Facts.
Yeah.
Need a safer bank. I've been saving change. I need some space. Chatting in my face. Get from around my way.